There's a version of you that nobody has met yet. Not your friends, not the people who grew up with you, not even the person you see when you look in the mirror every morning. And the strange thing is, that version isn't hiding because it's weak. It's hiding because nobody around you has ever pushed you hard enough, broken you down far enough, or challenged you deeply enough to bring it out. But here's what's even more unsettling. That version of you, the one buried under years of people-pleasing, self-doubt, and silent frustration, it's already awake. It's been watching, it's been waiting, and somewhere deep inside you already know this. You've felt it before. In moments where someone crossed a line and something in you went completely cold. In moments where everyone around you panicked, and somehow you were the calmest person in the room. In moments where you made a decision so precise, so calculated, that even you were surprised by yourself. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a glimpse of who you actually are. And today, we're going to talk about why that version of you exists, why it stays hidden, and what happens when it finally stops being quiet. Most people go through their entire lives never fully understanding themselves. They operate on autopilot, reacting to situations, following social scripts, doing what's expected. And because of that, they never discover what they're truly capable of. Psychology has a name for this. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not the evil part of you, not the dark side in the way Hollywood movies portray it, but the suppressed, unacknowledged part of your personality, the part that carries your real strength, your raw instincts, and yes, sometimes your most uncomfortable truths. Jung believed that the people who never confront their shadow don't just stay average. They become easy. Easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to overlook. And the reason is simple, in that when you don't understand your own depth, other people will use that depth against you before you even realize it's happening. Before we go any further, if this kind of deep psychological insight is something you want more of, you're in the right place. This is Shadow Doctrine, and we exist to help you understand the human mind in ways that most people are never taught. Hit that subscribe button and the like button right now. Not for us, but because what we're about to get into in the next several minutes might genuinely change the way you see yourself and everyone around you. Now, let's talk about something that most self-improvement content completely ignores. There's a difference between being disciplined and being dangerous. And when I say dangerous, I don't mean violent or harmful. I mean psychologically formidable. I mean the kind of person who walks into a room, and something about their presence makes people unconsciously adjust. The kind of person whose silence carries more weight than most people's words. The kind of person who, when pushed, doesn't explode. They become quieter, colder, more focused. That quality isn't something you build by reading motivational quotes. It doesn't come from morning routines or productivity hacks. It comes from confronting the parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable and integrating them into who you are. Think about someone in your life, past or present, who had this quality. You probably didn't fully understand why they affected people the way they did. They weren't necessarily the loudest or the most attractive or the most successful by traditional measures. But there was something about them, something you couldn't quite name, a kind of groundedness, an emotional stillness, the sense that they had already thought 10 steps ahead and simply chose not to show it. What you were observing wasn't arrogance, it wasn't performance. It was the result of someone who had gone through enough internal fire that the external world simply didn't shake them the same way it shakes most people. Here's where it gets interesting from a psychological standpoint. Research on personality and emotional regulation consistently shows that the people who appear the most controlled, the most unreadable on the outside, are often the ones who have done the deepest internal work. They've sat with their own darkness long enough that it no longer scares them. And because their own darkness doesn't scare them, other people's attempts to destabilize them, through guilt, manipulation, passive aggression, or social pressure, essentially fall flat. You can't threaten someone with a version of pain they've already survived. Now think about your own life for a moment. Think about the times you've stayed quiet when you should have spoken. The times you've shrunk yourself to make someone else more comfortable. The times you've given people repeated chances they didn't deserve, not because you were stupid, but because you genuinely believed in being good. And ask yourself honestly, where did that get you? In most cases, it didn't make people respect you more. It made them take you for granted more. It made you invisible in the very spaces where you deserve to be seen. Not because you were weak, but because you were operating from only one dimension of yourself. You were showing the world the accommodating, patient, forgiving version. While that other version, the one that sees through people, the one that doesn't flinch, the one that knows exactly what's happening even when it says nothing, that version stayed locked away, unused, unrecognized even by you. There's a concept in dark psychology that rarely gets discussed honestly. It's the idea that every person carries within them the full spectrum of human behavior, including the behaviors we'd label as manipulative, calculating, or ruthless. Most people repress these traits entirely because they've been taught that having them makes you a bad person. But here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Repressing them doesn't make them disappear. It just means you carry them unconsciously. And unconscious traits are far more dangerous than conscious ones because you have no control over what you don't acknowledge. The person who refuses to accept that they are capable of manipulation is often the easiest person to manipulate because they've never studied the mechanism from the inside. Understanding how manipulation works doesn't make you a manipulator. Understanding how deception operates doesn't make you a liar. It makes you literate. It makes you someone who can read the room, see the play before it unfolds, and choose how to respond from a position of awareness rather than blind reaction. That's not darkness, that's intelligence. And historically, the most effective leaders, negotiators, strategists, and thinkers in human history shared this quality. They understood the shadow side of human nature not to weaponize it against innocent people, but to protect themselves, to move with intention, and to never be caught off guard. Let's talk about what actually triggers this version of you to surface. Because it doesn't appear on demand, it doesn't show up just because you decide you want to be tougher or more intimidating. It surfaces through pressure, through betrayal, through the moment when the world gives you no other option but to access a deeper level of yourself. Most people have had at least one or two moments in their lives like this. Maybe it was a relationship that ended in a way that forced you to completely rebuild yourself. Maybe it was a professional situation where you were undermined, overlooked, or used, and the experience taught you more about human nature in 6 months than you'd learned in the previous decade. Maybe it was a period of isolation, of being cut off from the social validation and external noise you were used to. And in that silence, you discovered a version of yourself that was quieter, sharper, and harder to fool. Those moments aren't tragedies, even when they feel like it at the time. They're initiations. They're the pressure that shapes coal into something that doesn't break. There's a reason certain people come out of the hardest periods of their lives not destroyed but transformed. Not bitter, though the bitterness may come first, but ultimately sharper. More discerning. Less willing to waste time on things that don't matter. Less affected by the opinions of people who don't truly know them. More connected to an internal compass that most people never develop because they never had to. That transformation isn't accidental. It's the shadow integrating. It's the parts of you that you were told to hide finally being recognized as assets rather than threats. Now here's something I want you to think about carefully. The dangerous version of you, the version nobody has seen yet, it's not defined by anger or aggression. Those are actually signs of someone who hasn't accessed their real depth yet. Anger is a reactive state. It's what happens when your psychological defenses are overwhelmed and your system doesn't have a more sophisticated response available. But the version of you we're talking about doesn't get angry in that reactive way. It observes, it calculates, it decides, it knows when to speak and when silence is the more powerful move. It understands that showing every emotion you feel is not honesty. It's vulnerability handed freely to people who may not deserve it. Think about the most psychologically formidable people you've ever studied. In history, in psychology, in literature. What do they share? It's almost never raw physical power or explosive emotional expression. It's composure. It's the ability to be fully present in a difficult situation without being consumed by it. It's the look in someone's eyes that tells you, and without a single word being spoken, that they have already processed what's happening, They are not afraid of where it leads, and they are going to respond in exactly the way they choose to respond, not in the way you expected or hoped they would. That composure isn't coldness for its own sake. It's the product of someone who has met their own darkness, understood it, and no longer needs to perform for the room. Here's a psychological truth that gets quietly proven in social dynamics every single day. People don't actually respect endless patience. They don't respect constant availability. They don't respect someone who absorbs every difficult behavior and responds with grace every single time, because at some point, that pattern stops reading as strength and starts reading as a lack of options. What people actually respond to, what earns genuine, lasting respect, is boundaries. Not the kind you announce with a speech, the kind that are simply present, the kind that come from a person who knows their own value so completely that they don't need to argue about it. When something crosses a line for that kind of person, they don't get emotional about it. They don't explain themselves at length. They simply adjust their behavior. How much access they give, how much energy they invest, how much of themselves they offer. And the adjustment speaks louder than any confrontation could. You've probably been in situations where you wished you had that quality, where you wished you could respond to disrespect not with an outburst and not with silent suffering, but with that calm, precise withdrawal of investment that makes the other person suddenly very aware of what they have done. The good news is that this isn't a personality type you either have or don't have. It's a state of psychological development, and it develops not through deciding to be harder or colder, but through understanding, through studying how people actually work, through learning to read what people show you versus what they mean, through getting honest with yourself about your own patterns, why you've stayed in situations past their expiration date, why you've given people information about yourself that they later used against you, why you've sometimes confused being needed with being valued. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with this level of self-awareness. And if you've ever felt it, you know exactly what I mean. It's not the loneliness of being isolated. It's the loneliness of being in a room full of people and realizing you're observing the social dynamics with a level of clarity that nobody around you seems to share. You see the subtle power plays. You notice who is performing and who is genuine. You catch the small inconsistencies between what people say and how they actually behave. And instead of feeling powerful, it sometimes just feels exhausting. Because you can see so much and yet you're still expected to participate in the performance like everyone else. That experience is not a flaw. It's not paranoia. It's what it feels like to be psychologically awake in a world where most people are still sleepwalking through their social lives. The question isn't whether this version of you exists. It does. The question is what you do with it. Because psychological depth, awareness, emotional control, these are tools. And like any tool, what matters is the intention behind how you use them. The same understanding of human manipulation that could make someone a predator is the exact understanding that makes a person impossible to prey upon. The same emotional detachment that could make someone cold and disconnected when balanced with genuine empathy creates a person who can be fully present for the people who matter without being drained or destabilized by the people who don't. The same pattern recognition that could make someone calculating and transactional when pointed inward creates someone with a ruthless ability to be honest with themselves, which is honestly one of the rarest and most powerful qualities a human being can possess. So, what do you do from here? You start paying attention differently, not to how people want to be seen, but to how they actually behave over time. You start having the uncomfortable internal conversations with yourself that you've been avoiding, about what you actually want, what you've been settling for, what you've been pretending not to notice. You start treating your own emotional reactions as data rather than just experience, asking not just, how do I feel about this, but what is this feeling telling me about this situation, this person, this pattern? And slowly, without forcing it, without performing it, the version of you that has been waiting quietly in the background starts to step forward. Not loudly, not aggressively, but unmistakably. People will notice. They may not be able to articulate what's changed, They'll just sense that something is different, that you're less easy to read, that you respond rather than react, that certain things that used to get a rise out of you simply don't anymore, that you've become, in the most grounded and genuine sense of the word, harder to mess with. And that quality, that quiet, unshakable psychological solidity, is not something you can fake. It's not a persona you can put on. It's the real thing. And it's already inside you. It has been the entire time. This is what Shadow Doctrine is really about. Not teaching you to be manipulative, not turning you into someone cold or calculating for its own sake, but helping you understand the full architecture of the human mind, including your own, so that you move through the world with your eyes open, so that you stop being surprised by human behavior, so that you stop giving away your power in situations where awareness was all you needed to protect it. Here's what I want you to do right now. Think of one situation in your life, recent or from the past, where you knew something was off, you felt it clearly, but you talked yourself out of trusting that feeling. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was a situation. Maybe it was an opportunity you didn't take because the voices around you were louder than the voice inside you. Sit with that for a moment, and then drop it in the comments. Not because you have to share everything, but because there's something powerful about naming the moments where we silence the most aware version of ourselves. And if someone else reads your comment and recognizes themselves in it, you've already done more good than most content on the internet does in 100 videos. If this video hit something real in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The people who will benefit most from this are usually the ones who would never search for it on their own. And if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of power, awareness, and the hidden architecture of human behavior, you know where to find us. We'll see you in the next one.